Okay. Well, this is a little awkward. It is 9:33 Tuesday night, and I am waiting for our friend Professor Johnson to join us. And it doesn't look like anybody is watching this live, and of course I can't tell if it works. Oh, someone's there. Hello. I don't know who this is. If you want to send me a message in Slack, I can see that. I'm kind of blind apart from this. Anyway, I'm going to abide by the 5-minute rule, and if I don't see anyone else in a couple of minutes, then we're going to declare this on hiatus until tomorrow, and I'll send out a message about it. But anyway, one viewer, I appreciate your being here, and thanks for sticking with the cause. We'll see what happens here. There are some cool tricks you can do here. Oh, I see a second viewer. I sure appreciate that. I believe there's some stuff I can do. Hey, Ashley, how's it going? So you can change camera people. Let's see here. Hey, Allie. So I'm sorry, I'm playing around with the settings here, looking at this. Professor Johnson and I were going to talk about some stuff. Let's see here. I can enable this, so you can add questions here, it looks like, or type in questions from your screen, and I should be able to answer them. So if anything comes up, you should be able to type. And in fact, Ashley or Allie, if you're there, if you could type something or let me know if the question piece is working, that would be really helpful. Beyond that, let's see here. Oh, I could share my screen, so that's how I could get to that. All right. Oh, that's kind of cool. But I will get to that here in a little bit. So let me double check the Q&A. Not seeing anything there. All right. That's, hey, Ashley, I see your note in Slack. What the prompt says here is to ask your audience to submit questions, and they will appear in my screen. And so you may have to, if you're looking at this in Slack, you might have to click on that link that's there above where the picture is. Let me see if I can get to Slack real quick and see if I can see this myself. Here is Slack, course announcements. And yeah, if you see there is a link over here that starts plus.google.com/events, blah, blah. You may have to click that to submit questions. So if you want to give that a shot, that would be great. But if I get back to this screen, yes, it did work. Excellent. Okay. Oh, thanks, Allie. I appreciate it. So yes, it worked. So if I'm going to select this, then I can say, oh, okay, it just selects it. I don't know if it's popping up on your screen or something like that, but it has your picture and says, did it work? So yes, that did work. So that's a nice little piece there. All right. So, aha, Mark, you're here.
I am.
Excellent. How are you?
I'm well. For whatever reason, it wasn't letting me in for a little bit, but I'm happy to be here, and I apologize for being late.
That is quite all right. We have two viewers here from class to join us, Allie Palazone and Ashley Shea, who are both awesome. So I've got it set up where they can ask questions by typing them in, and Allie has figured it out. I'm not sure if Ashley has or not.
I see that along the side there.
Exactly. So, and this is probably going to make people a little seasick, but it's switching the camera back and forth between whoever happens to be the last person who talked.
Right. And you should be able to change that. There's a way in there somewhere. I can't see it because I'm not the moderator on this, where you should be able to click on whoever is talking and turn off the auto switch if you want.
Yes, so now I got it to me, and now I got it to zoom in on you. There's a little camera person option here.
Yeah.
But turn that off, and we'll be able to do the switching back and forth, and that should be fine.
Sure.
Oh, it may not be showing. Is it showing you? Now it is. Anyway, I'm going to try to get rid of this part. Is it coming back to you?
I don't see that. All I see is you and myself in the lower right-hand corner.
Okay. Let me see here.
For those of you watching at home, this is the way you break things.
Exactly. You're very good at it.
Yeah.
All right, there you are. Anyway, Mark, I think maybe just to start with the actual substance of the conversation, I should say thank you very much for helping me break stuff. It always makes sense to do it now.
My favorite thing to do.
I thought so. Anyway, but what I had asked you here to talk about in terms of substance was visual lying.
Yeah.
And maybe the best thing to do is, if I've got some specific examples I can pull up here, but it would be great if you could talk a little bit about kind of, what your thoughts have been on the subject over the last year or so. You picked up a couple of pretty serious examples last year from the AJC and the Banner Herald of this stuff. But when you say visual lying, what do you mean by that?
Sure. I think one of the big issues that we're starting to see the effects of is the newsroom cuts. And an awful lot of those newsroom cuts have been in the visual area. As an example, when I moved to Athens a decade ago to start working at the university, the Banner Herald had a staff of a director of photography, 4 staff photographers, and 1 videographer. So there were 6 people in that department in 2005. Well, right now, there's 2 staff photographers. There's no picture editor. There's no director of photography. There's nobody who's sort of overseeing what gets into the publication, both in print and online and mobile, and what gets excluded. And so what's happened is a lot of the roles, a lot of the responsibilities that used to be filled by directors of photography, picture editors, chief photographers, whatever phrase you want to use for it, those are now being handled by other folks in the newsroom who don't necessarily have a visual background. So a couple of times this year, I have taken my favorite local publication, and I say that seriously. I really do think that the Banner Herald, as a general rule of thumb, does an excellent job of covering the community with the resources they have. The problem is that they don't have the resources that they need anymore. So what's ended up happening is they'll pick up a wire story that has, in one situation, some information about a possible drowning in the Chattahoochee River in Columbus, Georgia. And then they'll go over to the wire service, to the Associated Press archiving system, and they'll search for Chattahoochee River. And then they just grab whatever photograph they have of the Chattahoochee River, slap it into their content management system alongside of this current wire story. And the problem that we ran into, that I noticed, was there was a pretty big discrepancy between what was described in the story and what was in the photo. And when I went and did a little bit of research on it, what I found is, aside this summer of 2015 drowning story, was a photograph from Atlanta in 1999 that had to do with a murder. And so there was this huge, huge gap between what you were seeing and what was actually going on in that situation. And that's the sort of visual lying that I have a problem with. I don't think in that particular sense it was malicious. I think that's one of those sins of omission, where because they had omitted to hire somebody that actually knew anything about visuals, they were just grabbing whatever they could get their hands on and slapping it in there and hoping nobody caught it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's move on to a couple of examples. I'm going to try to do a screen share here. And let's see here if this will work. Maybe screen sharing. And
well, now I can see myself.
I'm sure it's fascinating too. So
yeah.
Anyway, all right. If we go to here, you should be able to see something that says sharing fair use and the power of images. Is anybody seeing that? No.
Not yet.
Not yet.
You need to, I think, click that present to everyone.
Yeah, it's the frustrating thing was there we go. Present to everyone. Okay. Now are you seeing something like that?
Nope, still just seeing me.
Now?
Nope, still me.
Well, you're interesting, but
No, I'm really not. I'm supposed to be on the other side of the camera. This is a little awkward. I feel like I should sing a song or something like that, but my wife is downstairs and she doesn't like it when I sing.
yeah, mine is inside, no doubt laughing at me as I think she can hear this. Let me try this again. I'm going to try to screen share and click there on the sports social media, share. It says your screen sharing
There it
presented.
is.
Okay, now you see it?
Yes, we do.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so this is, whoops, we don't need the monkey right now. Whoops, or that one. There we go. Yeah, Google Slides is a little touchy. Like it's just very delicate. If you touch anything, it starts doing things.
Mhm.
So let's start. This is kind of what prompted the immediate conversation, but let's actually start with this the local conversation here, man, on the right. And this is a story that ran on AJC's Dog Nation site, I guess about 2 weeks or so ago. It's written by Kristen Miller, who's one of our Grady Sports students, and it's a pretty decent story about the battle hymn of the Bulldog Nation,
Mhm.
and the I don't want to call it a ritual necessarily, but that's probably the best word to use actually. But custom, shall we say, before every game, and this really drove you nuts. So why?
It did. So if you go through and read the story, which is really well reported, there's a lot of good sources in here. It's a wonderful historical background looking at why the Battle Hymn of the Republic is played at the beginning, sort of how it began. It's not that long standing of a tradition. It's only been done for the last 15 years. But if you read the story, they talk to the woman who plays the battle, who plays this trumpet solo. It's a 14-note solo at the beginning of the song, and it's a woman. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, so we have a woman quoted as playing this, and there's a guy, pretty clearly a guy in here. The other thing that happens is in the story, they describe how it's the lone trumpeter that stands at the southwest quarter of the stadium, up very high. And I've been to enough games and I've watched this from a distance that I'm looking at this image and I'm going, once again, it's the wrong gender, but maybe this is an image of last year's trumpeter, but that's not somebody who's standing up at the southwest corner. I'm sort of looking at this and it's just not matching the story. And so there's this cognitive dissonance going on between what's being described and what's being shown to me. And once again, did a little bit of research and found out that this is a 2004 photograph of an unnamed trumpeter on the field. And that was the other thing, is if you look carefully in the background here, you can see there are other members of the Redcoat Marching Band back there, and you can see the stadium. You can see folks in red and white back there. And those are things that you would not see if this was the lone trumpeter up at that high southwest corner of the stadium position there. And again, this is a situation where somebody was told, find a visual for this, and they just hopped into Getty Images, in this case, into their archive, and searched for trumpet and probably Georgia band, because it took me a little while to find this because the caption on the photograph actually wasn't that great. So it doesn't mention the word Redcoat in it. It just says Georgia Marching Band. So it took me a little while to find it, but it's an 11-year-old photograph. And it's not the lone trumpeter. It's got all of these problems with it. Somebody's going to look at this and say, oh, so that's what the lone trumpeter looks like. But if they read the story, there's going to be this bit of cognitive dissonance. Well, they're supposed to be up high by themselves, and they're not up high. They're talking about a woman, and this is a guy. There's just all of these little things in here that are problematic. And as soon as you start that level of dissonance, what ends up happening is you start questioning everything else, I think, in the story. And you say, well, if they got that wrong, what else did they get wrong? And that's when this credibility starts to fall apart here.
Yeah, and let me actually, that surprised me because I didn't even see a caption in this. Do you remember where it was or how it was positioned?
There was no caption and there was no credit line on it. So what I ended up having to do was a little bit of backwards research. I grabbed the image and I did a reverse Google image search on it, and
Mhm.
it popped up in a story from 2 or 3 years ago. And that one had a caption, and I had a partial caption on it that told me that it was a Getty Images photographer who shot it. So then I went to the Getty Images website and searched through their archive and had to go back through several pages worth of them until I found this picture. So it took a little bit of digging to figure out where the image came from, but I probably spent 5 or 6 minutes figuring it out. It wasn't difficult to do, but again, why in the world was I being forced to do this? Why would I want to start thinking about, is this the right image that fits the story?
Mhm. Yeah, and I guess that's the other thing I want to talk about is what kind, I mean, you've seen that, you could think about how to frame that shot, how to prepare for getting the best possible shot. what kind of a difference do you think it would have made to the impact of the story? Not just to clear up the cognitive dissonance that you're talking about, but actually to try to shoot a honest and well-reported photo of that moment before the game when this happens.
One of the things that we're seeing with online, and I'm looking over here at your questions. I've got a couple of folks who are not seeing the images here, so let's take a half a moment here.
Yeah.
See if we can figure out why some of our viewers are not able to see the images here. Those of you who are listening in, can you chime in whether you can see it now? Because I'm seeing a whole lot of nope, not a nope. I still don't see it.
Yeah, I see Ashley and Al. Oh, you know what? I think I see the problem. Ashley and Allie, could one of you all just say quickly if you can see it now? Mark, can you still see it?
I can.
Okay. It's had to do actually with the camera person, I think. I'm not seeing any response from our... Okay. I'm also seeing some notes, Mark, in Slack besides what we can see here. So I'm just going to select one. I'm going to say... So this is Ashley saying no, but I'm just going to say, let me know if you can see it now. Just if you can type a note either in Slack or in...
All right. Somebody said they see it now.
Okay.
So...
Weird. You can you can see the questions and I cannot. So this is interesting.
Right, so Ashley says I can. Kendall says I see it now.
Yeah, and Allie Palazone says as well that she can see it now. Okay, good. All right. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. All right. So anyway, so you see this image now, guys, and you can see that this is clearly a Redcoat band member on the field. And I'll get to these other links on the other side here in a second. But anyway, Mark, to get back to this question I asked, and let me see if I can, yeah, here we go. This should, okay, we still don't want the monkey. We just want this. All right.
Everybody loves the monkey.
Everybody, I love the monkey. Everyone actually hated the monkey, but very amusing when we talked about which image I could use for my avatar. Anyway, so back to this one. So not as, like the question I asked was, you mentioned that seeing this clearly inaccurate photo that I'm sure whoever is doing the design work for Dog Nation just grabbed quickly out of the Getty archive or whatever they have access to and slapped it in here with Georgia and Trumpet on it. It's probably the search that they used. And you talked about the cognitive dissonance when they're talking about a young woman standing up there in the upper deck in the southwest corner and seeing this here on the field.
Right.
But so aside from clearing up the cognitive dissonance, and this is the research project I'd love to get started on at some point, what kind of impact do you think it would have on the perceptions of the piece if you had a visually accurate, well-reported, sort of well-constructed image of what was going on here?
Well, I think that higher level of comprehension and comprehensiveness is always going to be beneficial for the audience, because what's happened is that we have an incomplete, pardon the pun, but an incomplete picture now of what the lone trumpeter does and who it is and how this whole scene. This is a very visual, very emotional kind of a scene, and somebody who's never been to a University of Georgia home football game has a vision in their head from the text, and then they're looking at this photograph and they come away going, well, okay, so that's what it looks like. But if you're there and you have the actual image of that lone trumpeter all by themselves, way up high, far away from the rest of the band, that's visually, it's a really, really powerful thing. And that visual narrative, I think, is going to strengthen, massively, massively strengthen the written narrative that that Kristen Miller has put together here. I mean, she does a wonderful job of describing the scene, but that doesn't get mirrored in the visual that's here. And in this situation, there's two solutions to this problem as I see it. The first one is that, you actually spend the money and you hire a photographer to go shoot this. I mean, it happens 7 or 8 times a year. It's not that hard of an image to get, but you got to put the money into this. If you're going to hire someone to write the story, why not hire somebody to also create the visual? The second option is, well, you didn't get exactly what you wanted by going to Getty Images. Where else could you find this image? Well, the University of Georgia has a staff of photographers. Why not call the University of Georgia and see if they have an actual picture of this? The Redcoats have 2 staff photographers that cover the games. Why not contact them and say, hey, do you have a picture of the lone trumpeter that we can use for the story that we're doing on here? Now, as a journalist, I'm always a little queasy about handout photos, but I'd rather have a handout photo that's accurate than an editorially produced photograph that's a lie, if that makes sense.
It does. Let me ask you to say one more word about what you mean by handout photos, because we have a couple of PR folks who are watching right now.
Sure. So handout photo is the phrase that we use when an organization provides a photograph to a news organization. So you'll have you may have different charities that hire a photographer to cover their events, and then what they do is they provide those images at no cost to media outlets, and those are called handout photos. Back when I was an independent photographer in the early and mid 90s, I did a little bit of public relations photography. So occasionally I would have somebody like Reebok hire me to photograph some event that they had, and then I would go to the Associated Press and I would offer them those images for the wire service at no charge. And when they went out, they actually were tagged as HO or handout photos, so that it was very clear that these were not editorially produced images, that they were coming from the source of the story, not from a journalist.
Gotcha. Let me show another couple of examples really quick of this, and this is more, I think, typically what we're seeing on the web now. But I've just clicked on a link to Uproxx, which shows a young woman clearly taking a selfie. Can you see this? Is this appearing up here?
Yep.
Okay, good. And it's clearly an exotic location, and ha ha ha, you know, selfies have killed more people than sharks have this year. And this is, they actually do credit it, it's a Getty image, so it's right there. But there's kind of a problem with this, and do you want to say what it is, or you want me to?
I haven't researched this one too heavily, but I'm going to guess that she has not been killed by a shark.
Or a shark, or a selfie, either one. You know,
Yeah.
this clearly, you know, there's no evidence that anyone has been harmed in the making of this selfie.
Right.
And so, you know, it's a nice shot of a selfie, exotic locale, I get it, but there's just something basic that you kind of look at this and you think you're seeing a snuff image, when in fact that seems pretty rare, and they certainly don't talk about it at all in the story.
Right. You know, the other problem is that as far as a selfie goes, that one is so ambiguous. It's not exotic. It's not particularly well composed. It's not very well controlled. It's just not a very good photo, all right, so here's the old guy in me coming out for all of the students in the audience. I don't really understand selfies. It's a phenomenally narcissistic way of viewing the world, and it's more bragging than anything else, but that's me being old.
I will say the same thing, and I'll say, to credit my students, or at least the ones I follow on social media, I have seen very few selfies. I mean, you
Awesome.
sometimes see cute pictures of boyfriends and girlfriends or sorority sisters or something like that. And the only thing to me that makes this exotic is those rocks over her right shoulder that I just really want to climb looking at them. But anyway, we'll leave that aside. Yeah. Then the funny thing about this is that this is actually, you know, again, kind of the modern media era. This Uproxx thing here is just basically a rewrite and a you know, a screen grab from another story that was on Mashable. That again is about selfie deaths, and you get pretty much the same headline over there. It's been shared 145,000 times, so I don't want to even think about how much money this is making for Mashable, but just me doing this now. But then again, you get just about the exact same image.
Yeah, and this is, you know, this goes back to all of the studies that have been done over the last 5 or 10 years when it comes to online and mobile. The level of engagement that you get when you have a visual skyrockets. The problem is that publishers are using that and saying, well, you have to have a visual in there, without thinking about, okay, is it a quality visual? Is it a relevant visual? And at what point in time do we get the backlash? At what point in time do we end up with some of these really, really atrocious situations that we've seen a couple of times, that I've blogged about once or twice, where you end up with a file photo, or you end up with a situation where you're running a photograph that has nothing to do with the story, and rerunning a photograph has some potential for harm. You know, let's go back to the Chattahoochee River situation. You know, the image that they picked up was from a murder investigation, and there was nothing malicious about the death of this kid in the Chattahoochee River. It was just an unfortunate incident there. So, you know, if somebody knows that image, remembers that that was the scene of a murder, and they think that's where the kid was killed, it's like, I mean, it's just the associations that you're going to start building here over time are really negative.
Yeah. So let's move on quickly then to the other side of this conversation. I'm going to zip through Slack to grab something from our friend Jamie, who's in the class. And I asked Jamie to put this together because she had a great story about how she had taken a photo of Jake Gannis. You see here, this is what happened last week at the football game. He surprised his girlfriend with by proposing to her right in the middle of the G at the 50-yard line. And Jamie happened to be there. I think she was tipped off for a friend of somebody, and so she does this image, and you can see there's actually another photographer right there ready to shoot it.
Mhm.
But then she texts a guy. This is a guy named AC Law, who many of us know, who does the Campus Connections program for ESPN that is always basically grabbing free content that they can from students. And I'm trying to be a little bit even-handed here because it's a great experience often for students. They get to be on camera, but basically they're giving up their stuff to ESPN for free, and so it just makes me a bit queasy. But anyway, so Jamie then starts seeing things from lots of different ESPN accounts about what happened, not crediting her. You see, it's straight that same image, and then this one they cropped the photographer out of here for the main ESPN account, and you see this has been retweeted 2,800 times and favorited 6,700 times. So I don't even want to think about how many impressions it got.
Mhm.
So then, it happens again on ESPN, and then something called Girl Code grabs not only Jamie's picture but several others. Then on Instagram the next morning they put it up there, but then someone finally calls them out on it, and I think this original one, see, it does actually say credit Jamie Hahn on the image from Instagram there. So if this happens to someone else who happens to get a great photo, what should they do? What should Jamie do at this point, 6 days after this thing ran originally?
Sure. So the first thing that you need is a little basic understanding of copyright law. So in the United States, the way copyright law is structured, the moment something is fixed in a tangible form, meaning it's written to a memory card, it's exposed onto a piece of film, it's written in a notebook, it has federal copyright protections at that moment in time, which means that whoever the creator is, whoever owns that copyright, gets to say who gets to copy it and who doesn't get to copy it, who gets to use it and who doesn't get to use it. In this situation, if she did not give permission to ESPN, it's a clear copyright violation now. So at the moment of creation, that's when copyright is established. Now, there's a second step that you're going to need to go through, and that's the registration process. Before you can sue somebody for a copyright violation, you have to register the image with the Copyright Office in Washington, D.C. And it's fairly simple. You fill out an online form, you pay a fee, and it gets registered. Now, the reason that registration is important is if you want to sue somebody for an infringement, if you have registered it within 3 months of creation or before the infringement takes place, then you can sue for actual damages as well as punitive damages and recover legal fees. If the infringement takes place before you register the image, but after that 90-day, that 3-month time period, all you can get is actual damages. So in this situation, she has 3 months from the time she created that photograph to register it. And within that 3 months, if she registers it, she can now haul anybody who has violated her copyright into court, into a federal court, prove that the image is hers. She'll have the copyright registration, and then basically her and her attorneys can seek whatever damages they believe they are due. And again, that's actual damages, which would be whatever the licensing fee would be in this situation, $100, $200, something like that. But then they can get punitive damages as well. And punitive damages would be determined by the judge and the jury based upon whether it was a willful infringement. Did they know it was a copyrighted image that they didn't have permission for or not? I think in this situation, it's a very large media organization that is very protective of their own products. So they are going to know that. And then it's just a question of where the judges decide the value, the jury decides the value of that image is. So now, you're a journalism student. Do you want to go suing a major journalism organization? Probably not. In this situation, what I would hope she would do is make a phone call and say, hey, that was my image. You didn't have permission to post it on Twitter or on Instagram or anywhere else. And there's already some case law about using images off of Twitter. There was a $1.2 million settlement a couple of years ago against Agence France-Presse for picking up images off of Twitter and reusing them without permission. So at that point in time, I think you get to sort of name your price and say, $500, and you can get a license to use that image.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I was going to say, just to emphasize that point, is that we're probably, especially in a case like this, not talking about an actual lawsuit, but merely asserting your legal rights and getting the organization to do the right thing with the photo.
Right. You know, I think in all these situations, your first course of action is to contact them and say, hey, I think you screwed up in this situation. This was my image, not yours. Let's work something out. That way you keep the attorneys out of it. You keep it out of the courts. The courts have enough other things to do than to be handling this sort of stuff. If they say no, then I think at that point in time, you register the image and you contact the copyright attorney. And that's where you go from there. As soon as the attorneys get involved, it gets a lot more expensive really, really fast.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's stop there and let's see if anybody has any questions.
Sure.
All right, I should have just come back into the frame
You did
there.
on mine.
Okay, good. Problem is now I've got it screwed up so that it is not letting me shift back and forth based on who's talking. So there's you, there's me. We'll leave it on you, and let me just see here if anyone has any questions. Things coming up. All I'm seeing is people who are seeing it now or not seeing it now. Or
That's all I see too.
yeah. Okay. Well, we'll just take maybe 30 seconds. Let me ask if we're waiting for anybody to ask a question. First of all, let me thank Kendall and Allie and Ashley for bearing with us through all of this. Let me also ask either them or you, Mark, I'm actually doing this on my Chromebook on my porch, whatever that's worth, but how is the audio and video quality for you?
The audio quality for me is fine. It's a little hollow. I assume you're using the built-in microphone on it. The video resolution is pretty low, so you're looking a little 256 color palette as opposed to millions of colors there. And the latency between the video and the audio is pretty high right now, meaning I'm seeing you before I'm hearing you before I'm seeing you. So there's a pretty good gap after that.
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of visual chatter on your end as well, and sometimes there's that place where it sort of stretches out the audio. But we
Yeah,
do have a question here. Do you see this from Ashley?
I do. So watermarks on photos that you post to social media, I don't necessarily think it's a bad idea, but it is not a legal requirement. Just so you know, there's no requirement for you to put a copyright symbol or copyright 2015 in your name on those images, either as a watermark or embedded in the metadata or anything like that. There's no requirement to have that registration mark, as it's called, on your images. As far as putting it on social media, when you post it, I don't have a problem with that. You got to find some elegant way that isn't going to sort of affect the quality of the content there. And one thing to think about is there have been a couple of situations where folks have watermarked images, and the solution for whoever it is that wants to infringe that copyright is they just crop it out. So it's not a perfect solution for that, but it's not a bad start. That's for sure.
But too, just because you put a watermark on it, that doesn't mean that someone else isn't going to just thieve it and put it on their website or whatever. Anyways,
Right.
just not worry about the watermark.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else from anybody? I really appreciate you all staying up with us tonight, although I'm sure it's early by our student standards, but it's late for us older people.
Us old people, this is not good.
Indeed. All right. Well, we will leave it here, but Mark, I really appreciate your being willing to hang out with us tonight
Not a
and
problem.
through this. I think this is a good tool, although with better hardware on my end, I'm sure it will be a little bit better. Kendall actually just asked pretty much the question is here. Actually, two questions, two really interesting questions, one from Allie and one from Kendall, so we won't sign off quite yet. But if you want to answer these, first off about, that just disappeared.
No, drop down further. I'm not sure why they're going out of order here.
Yeah, me neither. Anyway, so the question here is just, what is the best way for us to make sure that our photos aren't, I suppose, copyrighted by somebody else or stolen by somebody else?
Well, copywriting by somebody else, that's a whole other issue at that point in time. When you fill out the copyright registration forms, you're basically swearing an affidavit that you are the copyright owner of those images. And so if somebody else goes in and registers the copyright on your work, they've essentially, they've committed a felony because they've signed a federal a federal government document, knowing that something is not true. So that does pop up from time to time, that two people register the copyright on something, and then the courts have to decide who actually has the copyright. Keeping the original file on your smartphone or your camera or whatever it happens to be will allow an investigator to see all the metadata, to check the serial number, which is embedded with there. So there's lots of ways to prove that there. I'm not sure if that answered the question completely or not. What is the best way for us to make sure that our photos on social media aren't copyrighted? I'm not sure if you mean like terms of service taking the copyright away. Facebook and Twitter occasionally get hammered because people read their terms of service and believe that they are taking over the copyright. We could go off on a big tangent here about everybody in the last couple of days who started copying and pasting the thing about on Facebook. I declare that Facebook cannot take the copyright of any of my stuff. Sorry, but basically, when you signed up for your account on Facebook, you agree to their terms. You can't change the terms in your feed later on. But most of those places, the major ones, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, their terms of services are very complex because of the attorneys, but they're not actually seizing your copyright at this point in time.
Mm-hmm. And then moving up to, Allie asked a couple of good questions here about, sort of what's the best etiquette for a student to follow, knowing that she might want to go work for a place like ESPN one of these days.
And that's the delicate situation here. If you're a professional and you're making your living off of these, your end goal is different than if you're a student. I think you have to get in the habit of asserting your copyright and protecting the work that you created, because as creators of content, whether you're writing or photographing or doing videography or graphic design, whatever it happens to be, the value that you bring is in the work that you create. And if you lose control of that, or other people take advantage of that, that impacts your ability to do more of that work there. So you have to be a little bit delicate in these situations. But what I would recommend doing in that situation is what I described before. Pick up the phone, call ESPN, figure out who it was that is in charge of visuals. Look for an art director or director of photography, photo editor, something like that, and call them and say, hey, I'm not sure if you're the right person to talk to, but your Twitter feed picked up a photograph of mine, didn't have permission for it. Let's figure out a solution to this, and see what they say. I've done that a couple of times in some situations where organizations used my image without the proper license on it. And I called them and said, you didn't have a license for that. Tell you what, let me send you an invoice for X number of dollars, and I'll extend the license to include that. And sometimes they say yes, and sometimes they scream at you that you have to talk to legal, and they hang up on you. And then you call legal, and legal is usually a little bit wiser when it comes to copyright stuff, and realize that it's a whole lot cheaper just to pay the invoice than it is to get hauled into court on these things. There's not a lot of precedent that gets set on this sort of stuff, I guess, is the best way to put it.
No, sure. Yeah. Another thing I would just add about that is that, being that Grady is, despite whatever the rankings say, is a fantastic place, and we actually have a couple of alumni who work in social media at ESPN. Mm-hmm. And so I think we could probably find backdoor ways to get through some of this stuff.
And whether you need a front door or a back door is somewhat irrelevant. My experience has been the majority of people want to do the right thing. They don't want to take advantage of students. No, that's the majority, but it's not all. There are some organizations that have no qualms whatsoever about lifting content, lifting images, lifting video, lifting graphics, putting their own advertising wrappers around it, and profiting off of the work of others without any compensation whatsoever. But you don't know which way it's going to go until you make that first phone call. Mm-hmm. And make a phone call, and once you get a name, then you do email, because the email then gives you a chain.
Mm-hmm. Sure, absolutely. Okay.
So the other question that Allie has here is, do I think that ESPN didn't attribute this because they figured there was little to no chance the image was copyrighted? Well, no, they're smart enough to know that it was definitely copyrighted. Whether it was because she was a student or not, I suspect this was somebody late in their shift saw something cool, grabbed it, and just did what they thought they could, because they don't understand what copyright was at that basic level. And this issue ties very closely back to the one we started with the lack of visual editors. A good director of photography, a good photo editor is going to understand copyright law, because they deal with it in contract negotiations all the time. And what you probably have is somebody who's authorized to do something that they don't understand the legal complications.
Yeah. That is a really important point. It looks like the video is chattering here a little bit. Are you back with us?
I'm here.
Okay. Yeah, it's just totally out of phase at this point. We're running, it's 40 minutes, so that's it anyway. But so I know I don't have to do this under copyright law because I'm the one making this video, but I still, if you're cool with it, I would like to post it and link to it and just spread it for
Sure.
both my class and probably for yours because it's an interesting conversation.
Sure. Happy
Okay,
to participate in this. I
fantastic.
believe in doing things in the public.
Absolutely. Working at a public university, that definitely helps.
It
So
does.
Mark Johnson, thanks very much for joining us for this, for our sport and social media class. And Allie and Kendall and Ashley, thanks for hanging with us and asking good questions. Hope you all have a good night, and we will see you later on this week.
All right. Good night.
Okay.
Thanks.
Good night. Thank you.